we've got the plastic rockers here, the IFS. I'm not going to be using these plastic rockers. I use the aluminium ones because they're more rigid. An aluminium one with 2 bearings is 2.35 grams. So the resin version with 2 bearings is 1.9 grams, 1.85 grams, as you saw there. So it is a little bit lighter. But once again, for me, the extra rigidity and accuracy in the front end is far more important to me than that extra half gram. And it's really important that when you put the rockers on, you put them on the right side or the correct side, because they are sided. You can see here they have a high side and a low side, and that's intentional. They're set up so that the low side goes to the damper. So this is the correct position. So basically the operating position for these rockers, this should be essentially, that position should be your static height. That's the sweep that you're actually using with the rockers. They should just operate through this middle range of a few degrees. So at this point here, I've brought the manual back in, and we're going to build the links for the IFS to go between the lower arm and the IFS rockers. And I just wanted to point out here that there's different size ball ends. This is 1171-5 and this is -6. This is 1171. You can see just there. This size, the shorter one is 5 and this one is 6. And it does make a difference. As you can see, they're very different lengths. So if you don't follow that correctly, you're going to end up with different size rockers than you intended. It does give you the measurement here of 51.4 millimeters end to end. That's not what we're going to build ours to today. We're going to build it as my car is. Short ball ends, long ball ends, and our 2 turnbuckles, 24 millimeters. And we're going to set that 51.75 millimeters. We're also going to use the tool that I clipped off earlier, the D-shaped tool, which fits these perfectly. It's worth mentioning you do get an Overdose turnbuckle wrench in the box. I'm going to take out the flat open-ended ball end tool. I'm going to put the D-shaped tool for the closed end ball ends in here. You can see I've laid out the turnbuckles as they're going to be, just to make sure that I've got the short ones on the top and the longer ones on the bottom, and the turnbuckles are the same way. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure that the turnbuckles are pointing the same direction on the left and right, so that you know when you turn it one way it's going to lengthen it, and when you turn it the other way it's going to shorten it. The easy way of doing this is to hold the turnbuckle wrench on the turnbuckle like that, and then just turn the tool. I'm just going to get this started and then move to the other side, and I'll set the length properly afterwards. So measuring now, I'm seeing 52 mil end to end, so I just need to go a bit tighter or a bit shorter. 51.8. That's close enough for now. What I'll do is I'll put these on the car, and then when I build the dampers, adjust it to suit the car. But it's worth mentioning, try and get the turnbuckle centered. This tool makes things so much easier, particularly when you've got to do a whole car like that. There we go, perfect. So they're exactly matched. That's a nice match. It's worth pointing out as well that there is 2 different ball stud sizes used on these rockers. I don't know if you can see this, but the type with the hex nut, they go into the damper side, which is the lower side of the rocker. So the other side uses a round base on the ball stud. I also use a 1mm spacer on this side, on this this side of the rocker. And what that does is this changes the lever ratio. So obviously the rocker these are evenly spaced even though they're different heights. And as they rotate, it's the same. Whereas when you add a spacer, it changes how much the damper moves for the same amount of suspension arm movement. So you can actually adjust the ratio. And it's one of the beauties of the IFS system. Same deal on this side. On the low one, we're going to have the 1534 ball stud. And on the high, we're going to have the 1532 and a 1mm spacer. So I'm using a 1mm spacer on the lower arm ball stud, and it's not something that's really required. And then I use the outer hole on these ES arms, and that's them on. And now I'm going to put the IFS links on. So I find it easier to put the rocker on first, and basically when you're pushing them on, just hold the rocker with this hand so that it doesn't move left or right, and then just push straight with your thumb, and they should pop on. Again, quicker is better because it stops the ball stretching. And then make sure that the IFS links are going on the same way, left and right, so that the short is either on the top or the bottom. I run it on the top, as the manual says, but you want to make sure that it's the same both ways. And then obviously check your lower arms are working nicely. And you can see that the rocker arm movement is good. Next up, we've got a nice upgrade that comes in the 10th anniversary kit and the option part kit, and that's the Type 2 curved rack. So you can see that it's got step positions for the steering ball stud, and it also adds a fourth hole on the inside, which is actually the hole that I use, and it basically means that your Ackerman is better controlled. So because the links are longer as well to the steering knuckles, you end up with less bump steer. So I added 2mm spacer to each ball stud on the steering rack as well. Once again, with every step as you go along, just make sure that everything works as expected. Obviously these bearings are expected to roll on the rack, so make sure that they're smooth when you've tightened them down, which they are. When you put in the rack together, there's a 0.2mm shim that just goes over this post, then goes into the bottom of the base. The screw is an excellent way to make an adjustment to the rack. Basically, what you do is as you tighten on this screw, which I'm not going to do now because I need to do it properly in a moment, it pulls the bearing to adjust the tension on the rack, and you can set it perfectly so that it just doesn't wear the rack at all, and it's a really good system. I'll just tighten it on. So I'm going to put this screw in, and this is how you adjust the rack. So the rail goes on like this, so I just need to tighten this screw up. Obviously you need to be careful not to over tighten this screw, you're just getting rid of the excess so that it doesn't move. And what I always do, if you look at how I'm holding this driver, I'm just using my fingertips, and I just wait till it gets to the end and then just do there is zero play forward and back, lovely and silky. So standard, it uses these 2-3mm spacers, and I'll just start one, just do the first thread or two, and then I add the other side. So I've just put the spacer on. Obviously be sure that the steering rack is square to the chassis and flat before you tighten it up. Most importantly, it's still nice and smooth without any play. So the weight of a standard GALM rear upright is 3.25 grams with no bearing and no grub screw. That's just the resin part on its own. I'll do a comparison now and comparing like for like, there's a huge difference. The adjustable rear uprights I'm going to use are 18.55 grams. So there's obviously a huge difference in weight between the standard resin part. For me, this is an absolute no-brainer. Even though there's additional weight here, this is one of the best parts that Overdose makes. These uprights allow you to adjust track width by spacing it differently. They allow you to change toe by changing the position of the spacers. You can also change track width by flipping this part to be more wide or narrow. Or you can change the height of the axle. You can install it this way, or you can rotate it and install it this way. You also have more options for your upper camber arm position, which is great. These can be installed out of the box with a Overdose chassis using their pins, but they also include some sleeves here that allow you to use them with YD2s as well. So I've just assembled one of the standard 45.5 axles. You can see that I've used a bit of black grease on the inside, just inside the joint. You don't need loads, it's just the same deal as before. Basically just helps wear the two parts of steel together and helps them keep them running smoothly. Then you get this nice sleeve that goes over and holds the pin in place. So the way I do this is I take the collet, put it inside the end of the dog bone, and I just give that a little dip in some black grease. Don't need loads, just a little bit all around. That looks like more than it is, but then I place it into the stub axle, move it around a fair bit, just to make sure it's all evenly coated. Then grab the pin and push it into place. And put the other collar on. Now this is going to be a bit of trial and error for me as I build this, so I may cut around, but basically I don't actually know what size spacers are required to make these axles fit. I use the ES arms like this on my own car, but I have a Tamiya diff that I've installed, and I've changed my axles quite a lot, so they're probably very different to what's required for this. But I'm going to start with 6mm spacers, which is the same as what I'm running, and we'll see how it fits. I run 2 degrees toe on the rear. You can see here as well I've gone for axle high of the two options. So that is left side done, and let's do the right side. You can see I'm choosing these two screw holes, which matches if I'm running axle high of the two options, then this is going to go to 2 degrees toe. That's the other side done, and then we just have to insert the sleeve. So this is the part I was talking about before. So you just change the sleeve that goes in the bottom to suit Overdose or YD2. Now this is a point, I'm going to use the Overdose spacer because I think they're a bit more accurate sizes than the... So when I'm installing the pin, I'm putting the spacer on the back of the arm so that it pushes the knuckle fractionally forward. I'm going to get this grub screw started just to make it a bit easier. Just holding that sleeve in place and then it's just a case of slotting it all into position, making sure that the flat part of the shaft is where it needs to be, making sure it's centered, and then nipping it up. Now let's find out what the deal is with these axles, whether they're the right size or not. We're going to have to space these knuckles out a bit further, I think. I've had to make some changes to the back of this to get it all to work together with the ES arms and the TC mounts. I'm running three 3mm spacers here and a 16mm screw, and that seems to give a decent range of movement and allow the axle to move within the diff output without binding anywhere. This may all need to be tweaked to suit the customer's body and also just for general geometry. So one thing that was bugging me about my own GALM 10th anniversary and this build was I didn't have long enough screws for the IFS rockers in stainless, so I was using the original black steel screws, but they've actually arrived now, so I've managed to swap those out. So I think they look a lot nicer.